Hello dear friends of late Roman history, welcome to this movie review, something that I never did before on this channel here, but I did a trailer reaction once to Gladiator 2, and so I thought why not do a movie review? Some people went to see the movie and they said it's not as bad as they expected, and so I thought okay, maybe I should also give it a chance. So I went to see Gladiator 2 in the cinema, and I will now give you my thoughts about the movie unspoilered, okay? No spoilers, don't worry, I will just talk in broad general terms about it. And Gladiator for me has a special meaning because the movie Gladiator 1, when I saw it, I remember it back in the year 2000, when I saw Gladiator 1, it had a profound impact on me. It had a very big influence on me. I was a big fan of the movie and it kind of kindled my interest in Roman history. Because before that I didn't know so much about Roman history. I always had a mild interest in Roman history, but never like a very deep interest. And when I saw Gladiator 1, I was impressed. I was like, wow, I didn't even know that the Roman Empire was still so powerful in 180 AD. Because in school we always learned only about Augustus and Caesar and the Republic, so all the events that took place in the 1st century BC. And afterwards, after Augustus became emperor, basically, I don't know, school didn't bother anymore. I don't know why that is, but it just stopped. And so I didn't know much about what happened later. I knew that the Roman Empire fell at some point, but I didn't know when. And when I saw Gladiator 1, I remember, wow, I didn't even know that the Roman Empire was still so powerful 200 years after Augustus. That is impressive. 2 full centuries after Augustus, the Roman Empire was still so powerful that they waged war in Germania, like they deployed huge armies in Germania and waged war against some Germanic tribes. Wow, interesting. Let me read up about that, you know? And of course, I knew that the story of Maximus the Gladiator was fictional, that is clear, but as I was reading about, out of interest what happened, hey man, this is fascinating, a lot of this stuff actually happened. Commodus existed, Marcus Aurelius existed, Lucilla existed, you know, many of these characters actually existed, and the backdrop, the historical backdrop, was actually not so inaccurate. So it was yeah, of course it was a fictitious story about Maximus, but it was embedded in a quite accurately historical backdrop, I would say. And so therefore, I'm hey, maybe I should give Gladiator 2 a chance, you know, even though many people are kind of mixed about the movie. But since Gladiator 1 had such an importance for me, I thought hey, you know what? Let's give it a chance. And so I saw the movie, okay? I saw it yesterday. So it's kind of a fresh review. Everything is still in my mind, but it was kind of late in the evening, so I was a bit tired to do the review immediately afterwards, but I hope I still remember enough from yesterday. So I will do a spoiler-free version of the review right now, and I will do another one with spoilers that I will release later. So let's first start with the good things about the movie, okay? Let's first start with the good things about the movie. I have to say, let me please have a look. I made some notes, okay? I took some notes. I took some notes about the movie because there are a lot of points I want to talk about, especially within the context of history. So, you know, I had to take some notes. I'm getting old, so I cannot remember everything by heart anymore. But what is, of course, especially noteworthy, the pros, if we go to the pros first, of course, the movie is visually impressive. Okay, that is clear. We live in an age where special effects are extremely good and have been since, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years now almost, with computer graphics, CGI and so on. So of course we all knew that the movie would be visually impressive. Okay, that's you know, all these Marvel movies, all these movies for decades now have been visually impressive. That was never the problem, you know. People didn't say the last 20 years, yeah, I didn't like the movie so much because it wasn't visually so impressive, okay? It's pretty clear that this movie here, Gladiator 2, would be visually impressive. That was that was pretty clear, I would say. So you will not be disappointed by the visuals. The visual aesthetic, I would say, is very high quality. Okay, it's very high quality. However, I have a bit of a gripe with the visual aesthetic style, because it's for my taste too colorful. It's very colorful. I miss this old, you know, like color, toned down color grading of the old Gladiator 1. For instance, in Gladiator 1, the opening battle in Germania, like it's absolutely not colorful. It's very blue. Like there's a strong blue filter somehow over the entire scene to make it, you know, to underscore the coldness of Germania. Like it's cold there. It's like up far in the north. Like, wow, there's snow. It's brutal. It's a brutal, harsh environment, and the movie reflects that, in my opinion, with a strong blue filter. And it does that with many different scenes later on as well. So the color is much more toned down in order to reflect a certain mood, okay? In order to reflect a certain, a certain atmosphere in the specific setting. So Germania will be blue, the desert will be like orange-ish, yellow, you know, like warmer colors to emphasize that it's warmer. So, you know, and the Gladiator 1 does this pretty well. Gladiator 2 doesn't do this at all. Like it's all the time super eye-popping colorful, you know? Eye-popping colorful, in-your-face colors. And maybe there are some people who like this stuff, okay? Maybe there are some people who like this. I personally would have wished that they would have a more, you know, a better color grading, or use these filters that they did in Gladiator 1. But maybe that's just the changing times. I don't know. Maybe it's just like after 5,000 Marvel movies, Avenger Part 7,541, with eye-popping visuals, maybe directors just forgot how, you know, maybe they just forgot how this ancient art form of like filters works, whatever. I'm not sure, but for me it's too colorful. However, the movie is still, of course, visually very impressive. Like if you have a panoramic shot of a city scene, it looks beautiful, of course, right? It's very well done. That's pretty clear. With the technology that we have today you can basically make everything appear very nice. However, of course, it is very CGI intensive. I have the impression that the first movie was still relying a lot on practical effects. And let's be real here, I think practical effects look still more realistic. Like computer animations are still not, after all this time, there that you have the impression like, okay, this is certainly like fooling you into believing that this looks real. Our brain still notices like something is off here, something like, it looks like plastic. It kind of looks like plastic, you know, still. And in my opinion, this is because like overuse of CGI, okay? So the movie, these eye-popping colors, there's, in my opinion, still a heavy reliance on CGI. So that's for me a bit of a problem. However, of course, the angles and panoramic shots are impressive. Like every time there's a battle scene, every time there's like an establishing shot of a scenery, like you have these beautiful panoramic shots, and they are like, the camera angle work is of course excellent. Like Ridley Scott, I mean, we're talking about Ridley Scott here, the director. He was always very good like with like world building. So these angles and establishing shots of certain scenes are absolutely amazing. Let's be clear about this. So everything that you have like you have to do with the visuals is amazing in this movie, even though small caveat for me, it's for my taste too colorful. But hey, that's maybe personal taste. So let's come to the next point I wanted to talk about. This movie has a lot of action and of course a lot of epic battle scenes. And I would say even more so than the first one. Like there are epic battles, there are explosions, there's a lot of action, okay? I would say this is much more an action movie than the first one. Like this is an in-your-face action movie. And yeah, many people like that. And certainly it has the advantage that you will probably not get bored because a lot of stuff is happening in the movie. Like a lot of stuff is happening in the movie. That's like, yeah. It's not a boring movie, I would say, okay? It's not a boring movie. Like, a lot of stuff is happening. Like, there are fights all the time. There's, like, political intrigue happening. There's, like, different kind of subplots going on at the same time. So, I would say it's an action-packed movie. And especially the battle scenes and everything that has to do with battle is, of course, extremely impressively done. That's crystal clear. Then what else was good about the movie? Like some actors I liked very much, I have to say. Some actors I did like very much. Lucilla's character I found very impressive, I have to say. The actress Connie Nielsen, wow, what the hell, did she even age? I mean, that's kind of impressive. Like, we're talking 24 years after the last Gladiator, and she has aged, she doesn't look 24 years older, so it's impressive. Like, Connie Nielsen has an impressive longevity regimen. I'm not sure what she does, but I want the same supplements, I want to take the same longevity supplements as she does, and I want to do the same gym regimen because that is like seriously impressive. But also like acting wise, I have to say her character was interesting. Her character was more prevalent than in the first one, and so I had the impression that she got more time to like she had more scenes, and so yeah, she had more like it was. I liked seeing her. Maybe it's because she looks beautiful. It could be. It could be, okay, that maybe this is from a male perspective, some kind of bias or whatever. But it was an interesting character that she played, and she played it, in my opinion, very well. Another interesting character I found was this Acacius character, who like who's the guy, like this guy who is in every movie these days, like I forgot his name. Wait, I have to look up his name, okay? I'm looking up his name. Pedro Pascal, okay? Pedro Pascal, the guy who's basically in every second movie these days. He does a pretty good job. I mean, many people said like his character is, I don't know, boring or flat or something. I found him kind of interesting. Like he has some inner conflicts going on. He's like, plagued by inner demons in some sense, and he has an interesting storyline, in my opinion. He has an interesting storyline. So I kind of liked his character. And also, like, from a historical perspective, I found it interesting because, there was always in Roman history this tension between the generals and the emperors, okay? There was like the age-old problem that got never resolved throughout Roman history, like the generals who have the military power and the emperors who like should have the political power, and like, but if you have control over the military, then the emperor oftentimes found himself without military power if he wasn't at the same time also the commander of the troops. But then he had other enemies. So it's like this age-old unresolved Roman question of like, general versus emperor. And that was done in maybe an in-your-face, super obvious way, but it was done pretty well, I would say. It was, I kind of liked this, you know, like this tension between the general and the emperor, or in this case, the emperors, because in this movie we have two emperors, about, of course, which we're also going to talk. Another interesting character I found was the Macrinus character, played by Denzel Washington. It was an interesting character, and I'm pretty sure Denzel had a lot of fun playing this guy. I'm pretty sure Denzel had, man, a lot of fun playing this guy. I'm pretty sure about this. It's a fascinating character, I would say, and it's a kind of like contradictory character in many ways. We'll get to that. But yeah, I mean, I think the performance was kind of solid. So, you know, many actors showed an interesting performance. I liked seeing many of the characters. And overall, I would say, you know, the pros, there are pros to this movie. So it's not like everything is bad about this movie. The movie has some redeeming qualities, some positive qualities, and yeah, you will not be bored in this movie. So a lot of stuff is happening, great battle scenes, great visuals, you know, eye-popping stuff going on. And it's Roman stuff. So like, we fans of Roman history, we are probably biased because we see Rome stuff and we're immediately like, wow, awesome. Finally a movie about Rome, not only about medieval settings or fantasy settings or science fiction settings. Finally a Rome-based movie again. Wow, thank you very much that we can still see this, you know? So it's at least good, I would say, that the movie, you know, shows a Rome setting and in addition, a Rome setting that is not common. Like, we're talking 3rd century. Like, we're talking early 3rd century. The reign of Caracalla and Geta, like, even though it wasn't long, was in 211 AD. So it's interesting to see this time period. That's also for me a plus on a personal note, because I always like to see stuff that is not the standard Caesar. Like 99% of Rome movies are about Caesar, and the other 1% about Augustus, you know, exaggeratedly speaking, but you get what I'm saying. Like, there's like an overemphasis on Caesar and Augustus, and the others don't get mentioned at all. So it's nice to see a movie from the later, still not late Roman Empire, but later Roman Empire. Okay, so that for me are the positives of the movie. But now to the negatives. Okay, now to the negatives, and I have unfortunately quite a few negatives. I don't want to say that the movie was bad per se. You know, I will give it a rating in the end. But unfortunately, there are some negatives that bug me about this movie. Okay, there are some things that I think like, Ridley. I'm thinking like, Ridley, why have you done this? Ridley, why have you done this? Okay, we talked about like eye-popping stuff, eye-popping colors and overuse of CGI, and that's already like in your face very early on. Like, man, it looks like it's not as realistic anymore as the first one. It sometimes feels like a fantasy movie, in my opinion, because it's like the laws of physics sometimes, wow, hey, I didn't know that this stuff existed. You know, like explosions, huge stuff, like, I don't know, makes Avengers look old, you know? Makes Avengers look old sometimes. Extremely exaggerated explosions everywhere and like completely exaggerated, where I think like, oh man, I don't think physics works that way, okay? I don't think it works that way. And the first one was, in my opinion, still more realistic. It was more realistic. And that shows, for instance, also like, there's almost like some sense of like, I sometimes thought I was watching a fantasy movie. There's like a scene where there are like, I don't know, some creatures in an arena. I don't want to spoil anything, but those creatures, they don't look like anything that exists on this planet. I'm pretty freaking sure that these creatures don't exist on this planet. They look like some weird mutation, some weird, bizarre DNA experiment, okay? Like, what the hell is this? These creatures, I don't think they exist on this planet, okay? Like, what is that? Is that a fantasy movie now, or are we still watching a movie in ancient Rome? Because it's either or, okay? Okay, you can make a fantasy movie with Rome setting, but then, you know, you should advertise it as a fantasy movie. And if you put in creatures that don't exist really like this, I have never seen such creatures, and I'm pretty sure they don't exist like this, okay? Then I'm sorry, man, but you're not like, you're destroying the immersion. You're destroying the immersion and believability of the whole world building. Because suddenly, like, I thought this was like based on Roman history and not like on some weird, bizarre inventions, like some, I don't know, man, like the movie 300 is a good example. Like, you know, when you go into the movie that it's like kind of a fantasy movie. Okay, you know, it's like an exaggerated depiction of what really happened using stylistical methods of like over-exaggeration and putting in fantasy creatures and stuff. But you know that. You know that from the beginning. But in Gladiator 2, it's like, oh yeah, this is like a movie in Roman times. But you're not, no one tells you that there's like these super exaggerated things coming and that kind of destroy the believability of the setting, you know? The believability of the setting suffers from this. So you will see what I'm talking about, but man, for me, that's stupid. I'm sorry, that's stupid. Okay, that's stupid. That's like Ridley fell victim to this Hollywoodization of everything has to be more insane than the first one, everything has to be bigger, more explosions, more CGI, more insane creatures, even more bizarre creatures. Yeah, Ridley, okay, we get it. Okay, Ridley, we get it. But you can still use creatures. I mean, this Earth, this planet has some terrifying creatures that actually exist, okay? You don't need to invent new creatures, Ridley. So anyways, for me, that's insane. Then I have like, of course, other gripes. Like, of course, the movie is insanely unhistorical. Like, guys, the movie is hilariously unhistorical, okay? Like, please don't go into this movie expecting that you will like see historical accuracy. This movie is as historically accurate as, I don't know. Okay, that's too exaggerated. No, that's too like, yeah. It's not like, I don't know what's these days with Hollywood, as if they were incapable of making historically accurate movies. Like, why? They invent stuff which is insane. Like, you know, historical time periods are mixed together. There's like a war going on in the movie. In the beginning, I don't want to spoil too much, but that actually happened hundreds of years before it supposedly happened in Gladiator 2. That actually happened, but not as it's depicted, and also like over 300 years earlier. Okay, 300 years earlier. And then like, of course, the armor, the armor style of the soldiers is not accurate, is not really accurate. It looks more like from an earlier time period. What else? Of course, the characters, like many characters, are invented. And the big elephant in the room, of course, the emperors, okay, Caracalla and Geta. You know, the two emperors who briefly reigned together after the death of their father, Septimius Severus. They reigned together from February till December 211, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, they are so unhistorical, it's freaking hilarious, man. They are... Did Ridley Scott, did he see a bust of Caracalla? Did he see a bust of the Emperor Caracalla? Caracalla doesn't look like anything like this in the movie. He's like, Caracalla and Geta are like, they wear like 100 layers of makeup, okay? They wear 5,000 layers of makeup, okay? All over their face. And man, they are like completely over the top, effeminate, bizarre, psychopathic characters. And he basically digs out every trope about Roman emperors that ever existed on this planet. Like, oh yeah, they are like super decadent. They wear women's clothing. They are, you know, wear makeup. They are like engaged in debauchery 24/7. They are completely crazy. Like every freaking trope that you find about Roman emperors, like, let's just shove it in. So it's super unhistorical. Like Caracalla was you can say what you want about Caracalla, but from what we know about him and from his busts, he was a pretty manly guy, okay? As manly as it gets. Actually, Caracalla, if you look at the bust of Caracalla, he looks like Maximus from the first movie. I wouldn't be surprised if actually they modeled Maximus on Caracalla. That's actually how strong this guy looked. He had a beard, he had like a stern face, like, you know, a guy that you wouldn't want to mess with. Okay, I wouldn't want to mess with Caracalla. If I saw Caracalla somewhere and he wants to start a fight with me, I'm running away. I tell you right away, I'm running away. This guy looked pretty insane. Okay, so and this wasn't the case at all. This was like super weak, strange, effeminate child emperors that are like almost completely crazy, okay? And I didn't like that so much. And there's other unhistorical stuff, of course. In the beginning, you have like, yeah, I don't want to spoil that, but there's like in the first battle scene, someone fighting where I would say it's not so realistic that this person would have fought in that time period, okay? I'm sorry to say this, okay? Like, many people won't like it, but it's not realistic that this person, you will know what I'm talking about, I will talk about it in the spoiler review, that this person was participating actively in battle. No, okay? I'm sorry, but no. Okay? So it's unhistorical. It's ridiculous. Then of course I had some other gripes. Yeah, the music. Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm a big fan of soundtracks and musical scores. For me, it's important in a movie, like the music contributes for me strongly to the atmosphere of a movie. Very strongly. It's an integral part of the movie experience, of the cinematic experience. The music establishes a lot, carries a lot of the atmosphere. And this movie didn't have any memorable theme. None whatsoever. All the memorable musical pieces were when there were backdrops, when they showed when they showed scenes from the first Gladiator. You know, when they showed scenes, or they were like establishing backdrops from what happened before, like from Gladiator 1 times, then they played themes that were from Gladiator 1. And those were the memorable themes, because Gladiator 1 had an amazing soundtrack. I still remember the soundtrack from Gladiator 1, you know, all the music, it's amazing, an amazing soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. Very good soundtrack. And the second one, I'm sorry to say this, but like it didn't have any memorable musical pieces. None. And for me, that's really important to create an atmosphere in a movie. It's really important, okay? But it didn't have that. So I would say that's for me a minus. Okay, maybe I'm a bit like, I admit, I really pay attention to music, and like for me it's really important for the general atmosphere. If I play a game, for instance, and the game has good music, that's a big plus. That's a big plus. I still remember soundtracks of games that I played 20 years ago, if they were like really good soundtracks. And also from movies. Everyone knows the theme from Star Wars, right? Or the Imperial March from Star Wars. Everyone knows it. It's insanely famous because it's so good. And in Gladiator 1 you still had like very good, memorable musical pieces which you just don't have in the second one. It's completely missing. The only ones are, as I said, like when they show scenes from the first movie. It's like then they play the soundtrack from the first movie, but it's like it's lazy. What happened? Huh? Where's Hans Zimmer in this one? Probably he didn't want. Probably Hans said like, oh, you know what? I'm not super motivated for Gladiator 2. I think it's a bad idea. I will not participate. Also, I think he was kind of busy with Dune, because I think he worked with Denis Villeneuve on Dune, and he made a quite incredible soundtrack for Dune. Dune, by the way, 1 and 2 are excellent movies, and they have an incredibly good soundtrack. Wow! Okay, wow! The soundtrack of Dune 1 and 2 is next level, is amazing. Hans Zimmer really knows what he's doing. Like, maybe you like him, maybe you don't like him. I'm impressed by his musical abilities, and every time he's kind of like inventing new interesting sounds that I haven't heard before in this kind of way. Of course, many of his themes are very similar. Like he will use very similar musical themes for the main musical compositions, but I think he's musically very talented. You can hear it. He's like always coming up with some new interesting sounds, and this adds to the atmosphere, but this is completely missing here. So what else? Yeah, I mean, of course it doesn't have so much. Maybe I should add this also as a positive. It had surprisingly little political messaging, which in these days is like, wow, I didn't think such a thing was even possible. No in-your-face political messaging? Wow! Amazing that such a thing is even allowed these days. It had, I can say, it didn't have a lot of political messaging, surprisingly little. But of course the theme was like, yeah, the Romans are the evil oppressors. The Romans are the evil guys. Rome is so evil. Rome is bad. You know, Rome is evil and bad, and that carries for a lot of the movie. It gets, you know, okay, it has an understandable backdrop, so it gets kind of resolved, I would say. I would say at some point it gets kind of resolved in some sense, and then you understand why. But still, the overarching theme for 90% of the movie is like, oh man, this like those Romans are like evil imperialists, like they are evil oppressors. Really? Were the Romans so different from other empires of the time or other groups of people at the time? Like, we're talking ancient history. People back then weren't friendly. Guess what? Before the Romans, there were other empires which like expanded and conquered territories. And before those empires, there were older empires that had conquered territories. And before that, there were the very oldest empires on earth who had also conquered other tribes. So the rise and fall of empires is always intrinsically, you know, linked to conquering stuff. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't so. I wish humanity would be peaceful. I wish we wouldn't have this like ape brain from our chimpanzee ancestors, and we wouldn't have this brain structure like and this tendency for violence, but unfortunately we have it. And the Romans were not more evil and more brutal than other peoples. I'm sorry, but this trope can be disproven quite easily. It's like, look at other empires of those times. They weren't friendly. Do you think the Persians were friendly? The Persians had some of the most insane execution methods on earth. They were crazy, okay? They weren't friendly people at the time. It was normal, unfortunately. So anyways, that's like a bit of political messaging, but overall, still surprisingly little for our times, I would say. Wow, I have to say almost that it's almost a positive, that it wasn't much more as what we are used to. What else did I write down? Yeah, I mean, basically, my main gripes with the movie are, as I said, like, it lacks atmosphere, it lacks good music. And now let's get to the big one, the story. Okay, the story. The story is all over the place. I don't know what to say. It's like the story, even though you can see that Ridley had some good ideas. Like, it's as if he had some good ideas, but he wanted to pack in too much. And there's like such a confusion of stuff going on. And the movie needs a surprisingly long time, in my opinion, to establish itself. The first third of the movie, I would say, is like, I wasn't impressed. I was like, okay, this is going to be a disaster. The first third of the movie, it's like, okay, this is going to be a disaster. Then, luckily, at some point, it starts picking up. It starts establishing the backdrop of the characters. There, you start understanding their motivations a bit, but only to some extent, because some characters, they behave like completely erratic and like complete psychopaths, and like completely like, what the hell is going on now? You establish this character and now you're like completely throwing it out of the window, and now suddenly it's completely different, but you don't explain why, really, you know? Like, the motivation of certain characters is not understandable, and they act in very insane, erratic ways. And of course, almost everybody's a psychopath, like, of course, evil Romans, so everyone is like almost acting like a psychopath, right? Very exaggerated characters, very exaggerated, okay? Even more so than in the first movie. In the first movie, you had like kind of, okay, Commodus was the evil guy. But now you have like many characters that are really exaggerated. And this, you know, is again kind of unhistorical. It's like a complete exaggeration, in my opinion. Complete exaggeration. And the movie, yeah, the story, it started being better in the around the half of the movie. So after a third of the movie until 2/3 of the movie, I liked the movie quite. I was positively surprised. I was like, okay, this is starting to get better now. This is really starting to get better. And then in the end, it kind of like goes insane. It starts going completely crazy. Characters start behaving like complete psychopaths, and everything is like going crazy. But at least you can say a lot of action is happening, a lot of stuff is happening. That is clear. But it is, I would say, it is much more exaggerated than the first one. The first one still tried, I have the impression the first one still tried to be a bit more historical, even though a lot of the story was fictional. And here, it's like, you know, let's just pump in every trope about Romans that we ever read, and it's completely exaggerated. And that, in my opinion, unfortunately, destroys a lot of the immersion or credibility of the world. It feels very, yeah, it sometimes feels not credible what's happening. It's just completely over the top stuff is happening, absolutely. And what else? The second movie is much more violent. Let's be clear here. This movie is much more violent than the first one. I have to talk about this because this is very noticeable in I don't know, many franchises or many, you know, maybe it's a sign of the times, maybe I'm getting too old for this stuff, but I noticed the violence level was cranked up. Ridley was like, you know, let's put in more violence, because that certainly will generate a lot of buzz, and people will be like, wow, that is so insane. Wow, that is such a brutal death scene. I will have to tweet about it. It's so insane. And then people are like, wow, it's so brutal. Wow, it's so violent. Wow, I have to watch it. It's crazy. So I'm not a fan of this trend, okay? I think it's stupid, first of all. I think also it's not only stupid, but it kind of desensitizes your brain. An overexposure, in my opinion, to violent scenes desensitizes your brain to real violence. That is my opinion. I might be wrong here, so I try to not consume too much of that stuff. Maybe, hey, I'm maybe old-fashioned here. You can call me European, you can call me a boring European idiot, but I don't see people being chopped up or whatever on a regular basis, okay? I don't like that kind of stuff. So it was really noticeable to me that the violence level was cranked up like by at least 2 orders of magnitude as compared to the first movie. And the first movie wasn't like a very peaceful movie. It was called Gladiator, you know? The first movie wasn't called Rhetorician or Lawyer or, you know, Administrator. It was called Gladiator. For a reason. There was like fighting going on all the time and like brutal sword fights and battle scenes. But still the movie kind of wasn't by far not as violent or brutal as this second one. So I don't know where this trend comes from. For me, I don't like this trend so much. I have to say, I will talk about it. No one else seems to be talking about it. I'm the idiot, apparently the only idiot who's kind of like, I would say, negatively surprised by this trend. So it has become mainstream almost, like, oh yeah, again a guy being chopped up or whatever, you know. I don't think that's a good trend, and I noticed it. So maybe Ridley in his old days now, you know, the guy's getting old. He's like, I have to show people that I'm still tough, okay? People think I'm old. People think I'm old and I'm losing it. That I'm like, I'm not so tough anymore. I will show people now how tough I am, okay? I think it's maybe a psychological thing of old aging Ridley, that he's doing like these, like, he's getting more violent in his old days. He's getting more violent because he's like, he has kind of like maybe overcompensating his probably noticeable deterioration of, I would say, capability, unfortunately, because like if you look at Ridley's movies, his best movies were his oldest ones, okay? I'm sorry to say this, but his best movies are his oldest ones. Blade Runner and Alien 1 are like masterpieces, unrivaled, complete masterpieces. Those movies are next level. Is there another movie by Ridley Scott that reaches this level of perfection like Blade Runner and Alien 1? I'm not so sure, okay? I'm not so sure. Yes, he had some other good movies. Of course, Gladiator 1 was really good. The Martian was also really good. He has some other good movies. I'm not saying he doesn't have other good movies, but like this level of perfectionism, of like next level, unreached, unrivaled. He was, how old was he back then? Like 40. He was in his 40s, okay? Peak. He was probably at the zenith of his like mental faculties and everything. And I think you see that he's trying very hard to like reach what he did before, but it's impossible because it's like he did such perfect movies. So he's like, wow, how can I top this? I must top this somehow. I must top myself. I must prove to the world that with 86 or 87 years, how old he is now, I still have it. I still have it. And obviously he probably, as sad as it is, he doesn't have it anymore, you know? And so what is he doing? He's like overemphasizing. He's like overcompensating. He's packing more action, more explosions, more eye-popping stuff, you know, more violence. Oh, we need more blood and brutal scenes, you know? Everything needs to be more exaggerated. The characters need to be more exaggerated. Let's exaggerate everything more. Let's pump in more stuff happening all the time. And so, you know, I wish this trend wasn't so, and I wish Ridley would go back to the roots. And, you know, more is not always better. More action, more explosions, more violence. It's not always better, okay? It's not always better. And so, you know, my summary of the movie is, it has some redeeming qualities. It has, I mean, the Rome setting is nice. Of course, obviously, we as Rome fans of Roman history, we instantly like Rome settings. It has good action scenes. It has like great visuals. It has like impressive, you know, panoramic shots and so on. But on the other side, it lacks many of the qualities that made the first movie great. And it tries too hard and tries to stuff too much stuff into like this runtime, and it gets chaotic, in my opinion. It gets like kind of messy. It's like it's sometimes like a fever dream, like wow, weird stuff happening, and then this is happening, and this, like too much, in my opinion. And that kind of like also destroys the believability, and then you have like these like semi-fantasy things happening where destroys the believability of the world, in my opinion, because I thought this was a historical movie, and it is in many aspects so ridiculously unhistorical, completely unhistorical, much more so than the first one. The first one at least tried to be somewhat historically accurate, with Marcus Aurelius, with Commodus, you know, with the war in Germania, the Marcomannic Wars, like Marcus Aurelius's wars against the Marcomanni and Quadi. It was still in the movie. But here in this movie, like the battle scene, some of the battle scenes are from things that happened in reality 300 years before. 300 years! Like, it's extremely unhistorical. The characters are exaggerated. So the plot has some interesting themes going on at times, but it has also a lot of member berries, like, oh yeah, remember Maximus. Oh, and by the way, do you remember Maximus? Oh, and by the way, Maximus, huh? And then they play the theme from the first Gladiator, and the movie doesn't have enough of its own qualities, like its own theme, its own score that makes it great, its own atmosphere, its own, you know, stuff where it shines. It's like many times Hollywood tries to kind of rehash the old glory days, to kind of like, you know, like they recycle and reuse old stuff. And unfortunately, this movie is not different. Doesn't have a good soundtrack. You know, all the great soundtracks are from the first movie, and I cannot say that this movie is very good or even good. I would say it's maybe mediocre. Okay, my summary of the movie is, it has some interesting qualities going on. If you are a fan of Roman history, okay, if you are like a diehard fan of Roman history, and you think like everything with gladiators, like if you're like everything that has Rome's theme going on, I have to see it, then certainly this movie is good to watch. Like if you are a diehard Rome fan, this movie is good to watch, but you must have a high tolerance for violence. I'm telling you this, okay? This movie is much more bloody than the first one. So, yeah, but if you're like a Rome fan, one could watch this movie. It's kind of interesting. It has some interesting, you know, beautiful scenery. The cities are obviously nicely made, even though not historically accurate. Rome didn't look like this, I'm sorry to tell you. They didn't use accurate historical models. It's kind of like invented, but still looks beautiful. The scenes look beautiful. The costumes, of course, very, very nicely done. Yeah, but overall, I would say it's painfully mediocre. It could have been a great movie if Ridley wouldn't have tried so hard to like overcompensate. Maybe he's like really feeling, oh, man, I'm getting old, I have to show that I still have it. And then obviously what happens psychologically, we are only all human beings. It would happen to me as well, it would happen to anyone. Like, you try too hard, and every time you try too hard and you're not like going with the flow, you try too hard, it doesn't work. A general theme of life. You want something too much, you're like, oh, it has to be, okay, it has to. Then it doesn't work. But as soon as you're like, whatever, you know, just go with the flow, suddenly like you're getting creative, you're not feeling so much under pressure, and woo, suddenly it's working. So maybe Ridley is trying too hard. Anyways, that was already, I've rambled too long now. Oh God, how long did I talk? Yeah, too long, so I wrap it up here. A solid, average movie, mediocre movie, maybe 5 out of 10. Like a 5 out of 10. That's what this movie is for me. A solid 5 out of 10. If you are a Rome fan, you can watch it. If you have a mild interest in Rome-themed things, you can watch it. But if you don't have, like, I wouldn't, you know, I personally wouldn't watch it if it wasn't a Rome-based movie. Anyways, I will, in the next video, do a spoiler-containing review, and then I can maybe go into more details about the things that really bothered me on a more detailed basis. Anyways, thanks for watching, dear friends of Roman history. I wish you a wonderful day and see you in the next video. Bye!